ministry. So, for example, what do you think could be a risk issue in this room where we're sitting right now? Okay, let's identify risks in the room. The aircon? What about it? Mm-hmm. Okay, sorry, he would like you guys to use the mic. Okay, so he's already telling us our attitude needs to be good for today. You noted the aircon. What about the aircon? Is a risk?
I think the aircon is a risk because she has sinuses.
Okay.
And she might start blogging up and
Okay.
drying up and won't be able to concentrate. So for us to mitigate that risk, sometimes we need to switch it off.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Anything else that you can spot that could be a risk in the room?
The electric cords, if they are not managed and set on the ground, might trip on them.
Okay, so a trip hazard with the electric cords. Anything else? So you guys are sitting there and you feel safe. Nothing's a risk for you at the moment. In the presence of the Lord. Okay, so what we've mentioned, are they tangible or intangible risks? Both. Okay. And then one thing I want to say up front is risk management is a need in everything you do. So it's not a paranoia. Most times when we're in a church setting and somebody flags risks, sometimes we say they don't have faith, eh? Things are going to work out. Why do you keep telling us about what might go wrong? Have you seen that happen? Okay. So in the church, I walked around a bit, and I just noted, when you go to the ladies, there's 2 steps. There's nothing that tells you about the steps. That's a risk. There's no sign. So you could have like old people that fall and seriously hurt themselves, or people wearing high-heeled shoes and things like that. I would like that at the end of our session, our master guides are also sort of risk officers in church, you know. I've never been to a church where they have a fire drill. Have you? But fires are possible in church, right? Sometimes we have these potlucks, and during divine, somebody's warming up food, and we're all sitting nicely here, and a fire can happen, but we don't know, and we've got kids, and so on. Hey? Yes. He wants you to use the mic. So those are some of the things that we do in the workplace, we do in the schools, but somehow we don't do at church. And basically, when you are risk aware, it's basically to say you don't want an accident to happen before you start to put measures in place. It's to try and predict and make sure that all these things don't happen. Say, for example, your cords here are quite neatly done, but if they were all over the place, then already you look at it and think this is going to be a problem. Okay. What would you think is a risk in the Adventure and Pathfinder clubs that you've experienced, whether in the local church or in general? Sickness.
Generally, children at that age, they are full of all sorts of bacteria and as such, whether it is at crash or at children's church, you'll always find 1 or 2 children who are sniffy, and they are a risk to other children.
Okay.
And that's why we have that crash guard. If you are those paranoid parents, you
Yes.
give the child crash guard because you are aware. it just might happen.
Okay. Anything else? So sometimes we don't take the sniffles that seriously because it's the season for it and so on. But what if there's an outbreak of swine flu? Then, we start to pay more attention. Okay, what else? While we're speaking of sickness, we do a lot of outings with Pathfinders and adventurers. And they can fall sick during a fair or during something. That's a risk that a leader needs to take note of before they plan a trip. Because if, for example, most kids are asthmatic and you've got races at the fair and you didn't ask if they brought their pumps or whatever and it happens on the field, those are risks that you take on as being a leader in the youth ministries, right? And sometimes it can be a fellow counselor, So some of the things related to illness we can't predict, but what can we do to prepare for those things?
Hopefully you would have done like some form of indemnity forms where you gather information. If there are allergies, they must be noted on the forms. If there's medication that needs to be taken, that they need to provide, they need to pack in advance. If it's generic type medication that you as a church can provide in your first aid kit, you must prepare and have those at hand.
Okay. So she's noted a very important thing. You must have a first aid kit as a church and as a club. She's also mentioned the indemnity forms. Do you guys do that? Are they valid?
Not anymore.
But we do them anyway.
They're helpful to give us the information we require. However, they don't protect us against any legal action should there be one foul attitude parent who feels I'm going to sue the church. So legally, they're no longer valid. They don't protect us. But they help us with the information that Mom Sbego was talking about.
Okay. So the invalidity of the those forms, indemnity forms, is that it tends to say you won't blame us even if we're negligent. And so it basically protects parents to say, but we can blame you if we can prove that you are negligent. So from a club perspective, do you guys have insurance? Okay, so I'm going into, specifically for youth ministries, the church has Adventist Risk Management something, and they provide insurance for the youth ministries. Pastor, is this available in Gauteng? The youth ministries insurance? Mm-hmm.
It is available throughout Southern Africa Union.
Okay.
We are raising awareness about it. We have actually conscientized the group in the basic staff training
Okay.
about the need for ensuring that everyone who participates in our activities has insurance.
Okay.
We no longer use, as he correctly says, they don't cover us for anything.
The indemnity
The
forms.
indemnity,
yes.
they don't indemnify us for anything. But what we have to make sure is our club is insured.
Okay.
I
And
spoke
it's
to the youth
via
director of the
conference.
the other day, and he confirmed that we need to insure everyone
Okay.
who participates in the clubs.
Okay. So I think it's my 6th week in Gauteng. I'm going to give you examples from Cape Town.
About the indemnification of things.
Mm-hmm.
Like what makes it invalid? I know it would be invalid in cases where you are negligent and you fail to do what is the bare minimum of risk mitigation and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
But what then comes in place for that?
Okay, so the thing is, most schools and so on would send those forms out, but they're not actually doing due diligence to make sure that there's safety. It's just you as parents just sign this, and if anything happens, don't blame us. And that has been the way indemnity forms have been used in the past. It's been a form that covers even when they haven't taken time to look after the children. So the reason for that now is so the church insures, and then they also have rules. For example, I saw something on the website about that. You shouldn't put kids in a bus of more than a bigger bus than 15-seater, right? And then if you do that, but then you've given the parents an indemnity form, so who's protected? So the key is to do your due diligence, make sure that you assess the risks in advance, and you take all the steps to make sure that that's covered. It doesn't mean that when accidents happen, you're going to be blamed, because accidents are exactly that. But in the past, when you signed that form, a parent had no recourse to go and say, well, my child was in a bus of 15-seater and there was 30 of them. They would just literally say, you signed this form, there's nothing we can do. So, I'll take the mic.
We also have a habit of, I'm loud enough.
It's for the...
Yeah. So we also have a habit of just assigning, responsibilities to specific individuals, and they book the camp venue, we go to the camp, and that's it. But one of the key things, which I like with especially the Pathfinders, as part of their requirements when they plan for camps, is actually to visit the campsite, to assess. I mean, if it's going to be chalets and stuff like that, you assess all the risk, the potential risks in the site so that they are noted. And in your camp book, they're also listed and you are able to address them beforehand. But also when you're going to do tent camping, you need to assess the site, the wind, the slope, the rocks, the thorns. I mean, when we go out to the pundus, it's all sorts of risks that we take for granted. But when you're doing with children, remember you're dealing with children from the age of 4, even younger, for adventurers and Pathfinders. So they won't think this is a thorn, this is a rock. So it is our duty as the leaders and counselors to then make sure that we assess the site beforehand. If there are things that need to be dealt with, they are dealt with ahead of the camp. We don't arrive on Friday evening and then everyone is struggling with thorns. We went for a family camp the one time, and as always, you leave work, drive straight to the campsite. We get there after dark. We're using torches and lights. We set up the tents and everything is fine. We pump up the beds, and guess what? The child, it was my son or Henry's son, he comes excited and he jumps onto this well-pumped bed. And there was a tooth of to remove those risks. Now the bed is fine. We just slept on the floor for that night. But it could have gone through somebody else's skin and actually caused serious damage, and you're out at the camp. So those are some of the risks, and part of it is the awareness about those things.
Okay, so now with that, we're moving actually to risk assessment. So the risk assessment, which is slide... Okay, I'll just read it. It's a systematic process of evaluating the potential risk. So it's what you do as a leader in advance. I'm not sure if you all remember when you did your driver's test, you had to check the car and so on. And I don't know if we're supposed to do that every day, I don't know. But that is your risk assessment, to check if everything is in order before you go. I'm going to send the slides, but it's a systematic process of evaluating the potential risk. So I'll give an example. When we had an adventurer camp, I went with 3 leaders, our district coordinator, myself as a director, and one of the counselors to go and inspect the campsite. So the campsite met our needs in terms of costs, in terms of location, and all the activities. But we wanted to go and see. And the first time we did that, there was a camp that had a lot of rubble. They were renovating. So there was old bricks, there was big screws, there was things like, and little, actually trenches, holes in the grass. That we didn't see in the website, obviously. And so when we got there, we said, we can't have camp with this. And they promised that it would be sorted before we camp, because Telkom was fixing. But lo and behold, when we came, they only had, those ribbons around it. So we'd done our due diligence. We'd put it on email that we cannot bring kids if there are these hazards that we noted. But to them, they just put a tape around it and 3 poles, and that was supposed to prevent 5-year-olds from running through, which doesn't always happen. The second place, we went to inspect the campsite. They generally have schools camping there. Everything was tip-top. There was, all their cables were put away and everything. And we almost said, oh, that was a wasted trip. But it's good to do the trip to see exactly what the beds look like. They will tell you it's bunk beds, but you want to see, are there stairs? Are the kids expected to jump down? And all those type of things. Because when you go to camp now, parents are trusting you. You didn't tell us that the beds don't have staircases, and so my son jumped off and got hurt. Those type of things that you probably wouldn't have seen. There is a form that you can download. I can send that to Mfunelo. And what that form has is the things that you need to look out for when you inspect a campsite. Or even when you choose a picnic site, if it's just a day trip. Okay? And then, so we spoke about sickness being a risk when, can I please have slide number 4? We spoke about sickness being a risk when working with children. I just want to list the other ones. You have child abuse, child negligence, and sexual abuse. Some of these things can happen in the club, but some of them could be happening at home, but you're the first person to spot it. So if you have a child that's being abused and they're in your Pathfinder class or in your adventurer class, what steps do you take? If a child confides in you, or you notice something that triggers that there's something wrong here, what do you do as a counselor, as a director, a teacher?
Do not pretend to be one.
You notify?
Notify the authorities of the church.
Okay.
They are the ones who have the authority now to go to the family and the authorities.
The authorities of the church being like elders?
Like the pastor.
The pastor,
Yeah.
okay. And if it's a pastor's child?
The next in command.
Okay. What else? I like his contribution, but I feel it's not enough. How do you make sure that that person does something about it? And what should they do about it? So let's make it the simpler one. Let's say it's child neglect. The child, you can see that they are left alone for weeks on end and stuff like that. How do you make sure that something is done? So maybe it's a child from the community that comes to join the club or comes with a friend. And they keep coming, and the friend says, no, my friend wants to come. You see the child hasn't eaten, has not so straight story about where the parents are. And as they get to trust you, they tell you, well, my parents have gone to Eastern Cape. They're coming back next week, I'm alone. And it's a 9-year-old.
I think if you've notified the elder or whoever is in charge, then as a leader and an aspiring leader, I should take it upon myself to make follow-up and make sure that since I was the first person to hear about this from the child, I follow up and make sure that this child is protected.
Okay.
Or else my conscience won't be...
Your conscience as well. Okay, so the Child Protection Act makes providence that if a child opens up to you about abuse and you don't report it, you're part of the cover-up. So if you've reported it, within the church and you don't follow up what has happened, or they say, no, let's just pray for the parents. And then you say, okay. What happens to you when later on it's uncovered that you were the person that the child opened up to? Do you see the responsibility? So that's part of the risk. The children will trust you, especially teenagers as they grow. Their adventurer and Pathfinder teachers start to be the closest people to them if there's trouble at home. So these are some of the things that we need to pay attention to, that we're going to be almost the first point of call. Maybe you're teaching something else in class and it triggers them to say, but this is what's happening at home, without planning. Sometimes they will open up in a class with other children there, and it has happened to me. And it's unplanned, but it's something serious. So what are the things that you think you could do if a child opens up about something like that? You've got a class of like 8 children. Please.
No, I was just thinking, I think if something impromptu like that happens, you could maybe take the child aside and maybe get a fellow counselor to step in and continue with your class.
Okay.
And spend time with that child so that in that moment they're able to sort of like give you like a full picture of what they're going through.
Okay.
And then you'll take the necessary steps
Afterwards. Okay. All right. So, yes?
I was going to say something like that, but then I wanted to find out, is it also fine to expand the topic while in class? Let's say you're talking about the 9-year-olds, you're having 8 people in the class. Expand it in a general way so that you can get views of what other kids are having, and then only after that you can go and do a direct consultation with the child and expand it on their way. It's a question. It's a question, yeah. But I agree with what Sherry said.
Okay. So because the child has already kind of spoken and the other kids have already heard, they will have questions of, what was that? So it is a good idea to sort of unpack it in a way that is still safe, to maybe speak about, let's say it's father abuse. And, you know, this can come out if you're talking about a father's love and the child says, no, but this is not what I experienced. What you can do is reinforce what a father's love should be, take note, and then speak to the child, because you've also got the 7 that will remain thinking, oh, this is what happened in class, and so on. And you've got to manage the spread of information, because kids are kids. If you don't answer their questions, they're going to keep asking them, maybe at home and everywhere else. That conversation, it's usually recommended that you don't have it alone. You have a second person come and sit with you, but that will also depend on whether the child is comfortable with the second person or not. And that's just to protect you. Can anyone tell me protect you from what? If you have this conversation alone with the child, what can happen if you've reported it? What if the child says, I didn't say that? And you are alone with the child. Because it's a sensitive thing, you become an accuser of something that's not. Do you understand? So it's always important to get a second person, just also to protect yourself and also to hear what you might not hear and balance each other out. Okay, so that slide is just the different laws that would impact. The first 3 is specifically to do with children and abuse and so on. The second 2 at the bottom, it still impacts clubs. It is about venues. So we've read about churches that collapsed when they were too full and things like that. There is due diligence there as well. So if you're going to have an event and you book, let's say, a hall that takes 50 people, but you sign up 200 people, you're liable, because you check the capacity of the room against what we are planning. You check, like we said, for the campsite, you check the exits, you check if they've got those fire extinguishers and all those things. And that's the Public Safety Act. Do you have a comment? So what's the capacity of this church? Does anybody know? 350. So I want to ask, as leaders, if you have, for example, you invite 5 Pathfinder clubs to come and have a Bible quiz with you, would that be feasible? Pathfinders come with parents, right? So each club maybe has 20, 30 Pathfinders. How many parents and sometimes grandparents want to come and watch? Already your venue becomes inappropriate. And then you have to think about parking. You have to think about all those things. Do you understand? So your role is to teach children, but these other risks, you must take them into account. You plan this amazing event. Some people will plan a whole conference event, but there isn't a venue big enough. And that's one of the most important things, safety. So is it appropriate if we just keep adding extra chairs? Can we just keep adding extra chairs until everybody's there and others are at the windows and whatever, as long as we fit? There's risk there, okay. Sometimes it's interpreted as paranoia because, like, we've done it before, nothing's happened, so what's your story? You know.
You know, my worry is we do these things.
Yes.
Almost all the time. Now, when you are going to come as a 2019 investituree,
Master Guide
saying, no, we can't do this no more. How many pastors are going to say, actually, yeah, he's right, we cannot? How many churches are going to be receptive to the call to say what we've been doing for all these years, we now cannot do because there's this new master guide, this newbie who thinks he knows it all?
The class rep.
So I'm worried about the application of what we are learning now. Will we ever be able to apply it in our events come 2020?
There is more coming in my presentation that I challenge you to make practical. That's why I say at the end of this, you each need to be sort of a risk officer, because you see the risk. And everybody that objects with you may not see the risk, may see you as a naysayer because they don't understand the risk. Maybe they might think you just don't want to be crowded by the extra chairs. You don't want extra people in your church. But it's about we learn and then we teach. A church needs to have a risk committee. I'm just saying, this is... Okay, can we move on to the next slide? But lucky for you guys, your 2 pastors are here, so I don't think they're going to object. 2 pastors. And all the chairs are empty. Okay, on this slide, this might help you in being the change that you want to see. So this is the 5 steps to risk assessment. So you'll describe the hazard and identify community assets. So by community assets, we're talking about who is at risk, what is at risk. So maybe it's the participants, the bystanders, the public, the neighbors. And then, what happened there? The fifth one disappeared, sorry. Number 3, assess the risk and take action. So, for example, we list all these risks, and then on number 3, you're now saying, what is the likelihood of this happening? So let me give an example. If, like, there's a lot of soil that's not planted on, and then you say this has a risk of kids sliding when it's muddy. Then on this particular day, it's not rainy season, so it's not likely to rain. So although there's a risk of mud there and kids sliding, on that particular occasion, there's not likely to be mud because it's not raining. Do you understand? So it's still flagged as a risk, but for now, the likelihood is low. Okay, you need to keep a record of your risk assessments and your findings. And you need to perform the risk assessment in pairs or more than one person. And that's just to multiply the perspectives. So maybe you're with somebody who's going to see a risk for old people or wheelchair access and things like that, which you might not see. And then the next person might be looking in terms of children. Somebody thinks, but ladies with their heels won't manage here. And some of the things to do is maybe say, guys, wear different type of shoes or change venue if it affects everybody. And also to note that a risk assessment is not done once and finished. It's a working document. So if as an assignment, which I'm giving this group, you do a risk assessment of your church after this presentation, because there's more factors coming. You do a risk assessment of your church, and it's dated 2019, first quarter, or first half of the year. And by the time you're getting invested, you can review it. Have things changed? Have we introduced things to make things better? So that point number 5 would have been review the risk assessment. Ensure that the mitigating measures have been applied. So it's just as important to suggest a solution than just to flag the risk. Because oftentimes we'll say, this is a risk, and we leave it up to somebody else to figure out how to fix it. Isn't that the easiest way to do it? So the challenge now as master guides is to identify the risk and come up with suggestions, working suggestions to mitigate those risks. Can we please go to slide number 8? I'm going to show you guys a video because I'd like you guys to reflect on it when it's done. Okay, perhaps while we wait, do you guys have questions of what we've covered so far? Okay, give me the stick, I'll put the video from here. Do you guys have any questions? Guys, where's the mic?
I'm thinking resources for when we actually, if we ever get invested.
I'm very worried. Okay. When is your investiture planned for?
See? One of the reasons why I doubt it. We don't even have a date. Okay. It would be nice if we got a checklist of sorts, because this hour and a half is not going to miraculously turn me into a risk assessment expert.
Yes, and I will give you, remember the list of if you're going to a campsite, this is what to look out for. If you're going, Our class rep, I think, is not listening anymore. This is the things I said I will send to you, or I'll leave today, actually. Okay. Okay, any other questions?
I think it's just a comment from my side.
Mhm.
I think, and somebody can maybe correct me if I'm speaking out of term, but before we moved to Ethel,
Mhm.
there was a full risk assessment done. There's actually a committee that manages the risk here at church. Whether it's they enforce it or not, it's another story, but I can certainly tell you that there is a risk committee that did extensive work before the church could be migrated from at Fairlands to Fairways to here. So there is, it's just that it's not communicated and it's not spoken to, and it's not publicized to the church, which is maybe a gap that must be closed. And a continuous assessment that's needed here.
Okay, so perhaps as a group, you can engage with them because it's a master guide assignment to say, what did the risk assessment of this church look like? And it's amazing because not many churches do that. And then you guys can do a project. So I can share with you what we did in our local church. It was, what we noticed was that in terms of infrastructure, it was fine, but it was more in terms of childcare during divine service. So we didn't have a children's church. And our church was in quite a suburban place, and the kids could run out. There were some teens actually who used to slip out that time after class, go into town, and slip back in just before divine is over. And then one child was caught shoplifting. And the parents were in church. So those are some of the things that we raised, and we said, okay, so if your child's not sitting with you, where are they during divine? They get up and say they're going to the toilet and they don't come back until the divine is over. What's happening? So you might find that here you guys are sorted because you've got a children's church and the kids are supervised or something, but find that one thing that you say, as a group of master guides for 2019, this is what we identified, this is what we suggest. And we didn't try and tackle the entire thing. But that specific thing, we started to see changes. We presented it at business meeting. We presented it during divine because not everybody came to the business meeting. And people started to say, oh my gosh, didn't think about it. And unfortunately, the shoplifting thing happened after all these presentations. And the poor child came in a police van. Yeah. Because he had to tell them where his parents are or whatever. But the shop owner said, I'm tired of these kids, they come every week. So, yeah, while we worship, things like that could happen. Yes. No. Have you got it? So it was I think being daring as teenage boys. And because I didn't think that there was anything tangible that they took, but it's still annoying to the shop owner enough for them to call the cops. So we found a lot of church members standing and really asking the cops, can you please forgive the child? We didn't know about it, and all of he says forgive. We're Christians. Yeah, so things like that happen. And sometimes on Sabbath, we're having so much fun as parents, and we tell the kids, go play, but we don't really know where they went to, you know, and those are some of the risks. I'm trying to copy it onto a stick. Where's the stick? I don't need this anymore. He's not playing from there, right? They're mitigating risk now. I think it's on the stick. Okay. So when you watch the video eventually, I would like you guys to take note of, sometimes it's not in your church here, it could be back home and so on. There's many things that you can implement, suggest, and be aware of from this video. And I would like us to reflect on it afterwards. Okay, we're gonna wait for the sound now. Practical example. Have you guys done your first aid training? No. It's coming. Okay. Go back. Mine is down. I have 13-year-old. You guys, definitely. Listen. I like your thinking. But when my kids were small, all the bottom cupboards were empty. If all fails, we'll watch it on my laptop. There's only 8, ne? And then you'll upload it there. Do the pastors give us permission? Oh, no. Okay, let's do a Q&A. How easy is it to become a Sabbath school teacher here or an adventurer Pathfinder teacher? What's the process? Okay. And if the teacher is not there, do parents step in? When the people are away, yeah.
Yeah, normally, there's no plan. If there is no teacher, if your teacher is, if let's say we are the teachers for those classes.
And you suddenly fall ill.
No, I travel, I'm not there, then the class is neglected. And
Okay.
that's a norm. We do, and parents, as parents, the Sabbath school
Yeah.
classes. You see, they're even saying hi. Yes, that's what happens. Hi.
Okay,
Yes.
as master guides, are you gonna step in?
We are already in.
You're the same people.
Yes. we are in the morning and we're in
In the afternoon. Oh,
already.
that's so good.
Yes. There's no church for us. really. No, there isn't.
As a third option. Okay. You will understand why I'm asking after we watch this. So, but then don't they join other classes if there's absolutely nobody?
They do, but it's probably
Okay.
one of us still teaching.
Okay.
That combined class now.
So what's going to happen when you have your master guide camp?
We don't know. There will be no classes.
In my class, it's only parents.
Uh-huh. How old are the kids? What do you mean you don't have a teacher?
4 years.
So you guys are the teachers? Okay.
There's 4 parents. Standard.
Okay.
No elected teachers or appointed teachers.
So you guys have stepped up. Okay.
So we rotate
Okay.
parents, and sometimes there's no parent. All 4 of us are not there, and God knows what happens to those.
So it's 4-year-olds, which is like little lambs, right? Youth Ministries says that class must be taught by parents. You guys have... It's fine because remember, at that age, some of them still need help going to the bathroom and things like that. So it's recommended and safer for parents to teach. You can have an assistant who is a non-parent, but parents should lead that class. Yeah. You guys are doing well. So you guys are in children's ministries and adventurers and pathfinders. Okay. Looks like. Who's teaching pathfinders? And the rest of you is adventurers. Okay, okay. Okay, so when we prepare for things like the fair, they've got all these activities like the wheelbarrow, skip, and things like that. What type of surface do you guys use? Do you use the grass or on concrete, or what type of ground surface do you use? For skipping, preparing for like a fair, where they say skip. You don't do fairs. What physical activities do you do with your adventurers?
With adventurers,
Yes.
you don't need to give them anything.
They do it themselves. Okay, so you just supervise them. Okay. And how long is your class? Less than an hour. Okay, there is no need. Okay. The very young classes we used to do half an hour to 45 minutes with a walk in between. Yes. No, guys, like adults can't sit still and listen for 45 minutes. What about 4-year-olds? What? We'd sit, do a craft, do music, and then if we're learning about leaves, we go and pick the leaves, and then we come back. And stuff like that. No, go as a class, and it's an exploration. No. Go and look at how many trees you found or whatever, but then it's just to give them a break from the sitting down and writing. But also sometimes if you switch the type of teaching you're doing, if you're doing, I like to say teach using all senses. So they need to touch it, hear it, see it, do it, and then they learn it. So if you plan your class like that, then chances are you're maybe going to walk out and do an activity to do with the lesson that you're doing. Huh? And do they sit still? Sounds like something's happening. Was the sound working yesterday? Okay. Or maybe it's set up for Sabbath. Okay. Why do you guys think that churches are vulnerable to child abuse on church premises? What would make a church an easy target? Child abuse. You guys look so worried.
I'm very worried. Yes.
Yes.
Maybe I think maybe because we are trusting and we're saying it's church, it will never happen.
Okay.
So we don't really, maybe sometimes we don't even talk about it because it's church. This is the Lord's house. Everything is spiritual, and it's not exactly sanctified, but spiritual. So it can't happen.
We pray it away.
And also when it does happen, if it does happen, we'll pray it away, or we pray it away before it even happens.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you guys do police clearance for your teachers? She said why? Mhm. And it must flow. But there is a process because you nominate the teachers, right? Right. Yes. So there is a process that just needs to be, you just add a few things to it. Okay, so what I'm saying is not necessarily practiced at all churches. Everybody is work in progress. But this is what the manual says. People must do background checks and police clearance. Yes. Because how do you know? Society, where it's registered.
Where things are enforced, where things work the way that they should.
So when we localize it, there is some information you could get. If, say, for example, maybe, so the predators list is closed, I think. But they would say if somebody has, especially for looking after children. It's not as enforced as in Europe and America, like you say. But would it be useful information if you found out that I'm a convicted murderer? Would it influence nominating me to look after your children? Even if I've... Yes. Okay, so that's really the point of it, to say the church is big. We need to protect the children. There's other departments that a repentant criminal can work in. And that's talented in children. And your crime involves children also. Do you see? So I'm trying to explore that these things happen. We were once in a church when we were in Europe, so in general, people assume that pedophiles are old, right? There was a gentleman who was under 30, and he loved volunteering to babysit when there is like let's say there's a week of prayer. Then he's going to stay with the kids, and the adults can. Yes. So, and after church as well, he always had sweets for the kids and so on. So for me, professionally, that was very, I was thinking, why aren't you with your age mates? Do you know what I mean? He didn't have kids. Okay, here it is. I can play it here.
Yeah.
So should I put it there?
No, we'll put this on that.
I am a child predator. That could be anyone, anywhere. I'm a stranger that lives in your neighborhood.
Can you
or
hear?
a member of your church, even a parent, a relative, a friend of one of your school children. I may be a youth volunteer.
I'm
going
gonna
to
start
start
it over because they're not in sync. Can we start it over? They're not in sync. Wait. Okay, 3, 2.
I am a child predator. That could be anyone, anywhere. I'm a stranger that lives in your neighborhood, or a member of your church, even a parent, a relative, a friend of one of your school children. I may be a youth volunteer, a teacher, a pastor. I look and act like others around me. And I'm only a click away on the internet.
I'm a child predator. Many underestimate the number of female predators. And when we are caught, the courts are often lenient. You've seen the reports. We too are teachers, parents, church volunteers. Without a criminal record, we are hard to detect and find. Pay close attention. I'm not far away.
Many places make it easy for us to slip in. No background or reference checks. No 6-month rules that try to weed us out. No supervision rules or guidelines that prevent adults from being alone with children. On or off site, if I'm there, your child is at risk.
How is your security? Can you see everyone who enters your daycare center or school? Sabbath school teachers are usually too busy teaching their classes to be concerned with who might be lurking in their corridors.
Think of a door without a window. Now, a lot can happen there without anything ever being seen. These are the doors I hate. I have to be extra cautious with this much visibility. Although, nothing is impossible. We love covered windows. Makes everything so much easier. We just tell a child we need to talk to them in private for a moment. Close the door. No rules. No visibility.
Without good perimeter fencing, anyone can walk onto your property. When there are neighboring woods, everything gets easier. Now there are new distractions. Think you can text and supervise children well at the same time? News reports say otherwise.
You're probably wondering how old I was when I started. I was a bit of a bully on the playground. Nobody ever did anything. Take a look at the statistics sometime. You may be surprised. Do you get the point? I like churches. I like schools, camps, places without rules, anywhere with lousy security. Are you prepared to keep me out?
Comments? Okay, can we reduce the volume? It's a dramatization of something very real. I shared with one of my sisters when I was going to present this at our business meeting and show, our board that this might happen. And she said to me it had happened in their conference. A man had walked into the church, because we open, we're free for everybody. That's a dilemma of a church. And the gentleman had gone to the toilet. So when this little boy went to the toilet, he found the predator waiting for him. Nobody could hear his screams because it was divine service and there was music and so on. And so it happened on church premises. And the parents were suing the church. So I'm not sure what happened afterwards, but this is stuff that happens, that when you say your 3-year-old can just go to the toilet, it's just here, you don't know. Sometimes it's okay to look crazy, to get up and go to the toilet with your child and come back with them. It's safer. So I just want you guys to reflect. Any comments? Where's the mic?
Okay, I'm thinking of our children's church and where it's situated and the gate, that side, especially during divine service where we would all be sitting here and sending our kids there with only one teacher to look after the whole group.
I think it's off. Oh, okay.
You heard me, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. No, okay, I was saying this video is reminding me of our, okay, I'm actually concerned about, as we're sitting here, what measures can we put in place to mitigate about the possible risk of having our kids down there at the children's church where there's another gate.
Okay.
And we'd all be sitting here as parents during divine service, and there's usually one teacher who's looking after the whole group when all of us are here.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think are good ratios for people looking after kids?
I think maybe 1:10, 1:15 max.
Okay. Your class rep has a comment.
I'm supporting that. I wouldn't even push it to 15, because with the little ones, they are fidgety. I mean, they need attention, and so maybe that 1:10 or 8, because they're very active. If you don't keep up, then we'll leave you behind.
Okay. And how old are the children at the children's church? Okay. 5 to 12. Okay. So as we know, Master Guide is not just a badge you get and you put your suit on and you forget. It's an active ministry. And like he said, that there are certain things that are in place for a reason, and it's difficult to ruffle feathers. But there are things you're going to learn more than just the risk module that you will need to implement. Your conscience will not let you leave it as is. So this is one of your assignments around the risk of children. Think of ways to mitigate it. We can't move the building, but maybe we can have more people, and maybe the gate can be shut. I don't know. But you guys come up with solutions or suggestions that you see as feasible and could work within your context. Okay, so that's one of your assignments. Pastor will let you know how to bring them through. So could I please have slide number 9? I'm about to wrap up because the next thing. So this is some of the things that came out. Churches are vulnerable, just like daycares and so on. But sometimes I feel like the daycares and the schools are more strict on security than church. I'm not sure, because churches are different. So a church is a community of trust by virtue of the type of organization it is. So it makes it quite a sticky thing to say, we need to be careful about who comes in through our doors. And I was still sharing the story with you. The gentleman, I was uncomfortable because the one day I said to him, don't give my kids sweets. You need to come and speak to me. What I didn't know was my husband had had the same conversation with him last Sabbath, but he still did it the next Sabbath. He was forming friendships, strong friendships with the children, and the children were very willing to not listen to their parents because of this new friend. And it was rapid. So I gave him benefit of doubt. So then, until I said to my husband, that guy makes me uncomfortable. He said, yeah, I talked to him last week. So now I'm like, so why is he doing it this week? Yeah, so Mommy Close came out. There was a lady in another church. We only had 3 churches in the city. And the one lady, she didn't have children. She was a South African lady. She phoned me on a Sunday morning and she said, I'm uncomfortable about that gentleman. I don't know how you feel as parents. I've tried to tell the leaders, but I'm just me. And so I think you guys need to do something as parents. And when they had the conversation with him, stating that in this country, child abuse is very serious, blah, 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 instead of saying, oh my gosh, I'm just going to stay away from kids, he wanted to know which parents can I ask them? Which kids can I not play with? And for me, that was more of a red flag, because I was like, what's going on here? And then what happened, he moved to another church where they were Filipinos. He didn't understand their language, but he went for a camp with them. So when I saw the church camp pictures on Facebook, he had kids on his lap. So I was just like, oh my goodness, and I was trying to think, why would you go for an entire weekend and you don't understand the language? He was kind of babysitting. Because we're busy, as parents, it's a busy world. When you get a volunteer babysitter that your kids get along with, that already shows you that it can happen. It can be the nicest person. They don't have a set look on their face, like the video said. It can be a woman. At that time, our pastor then consulted social services to ask, what should I do? And the lady said, check him out. You'd rather lose one person than all the children, because she was a social worker. And that was the advice then. But it's difficult for a pastor because they're not trained to chuck people out of church. And this is the process they had to go through. They tried, to say, this is what's happening. And he just kept saying, I need to speak to the parents. Can I ask the parents for permission? And so it looked a little bit like it's a clinical thing, like it's not 100% realizing what the impact is and what's the risk and so on. So churches are a community of trust. It's difficult to push back, to chuck people out. That's not what the organization is for. But the organization also says it protects children. So we need to be mindful of that. Yes. So there are some steps in the church manual for protecting against these things. In the next slide, it says there needs to be a 2-adult policy. You have to have 2 adults present in a class, not one person teaching. The doors need to be open. I know in some conferences the doors need to have glass, not solid wood doors. Volunteer screening have all volunteers complete a volunteer information form, check their references, and if required by law, do a police background. The reason it says if required by law is because this is for the worldwide church, and in some countries there is no register, so even if you do a background check, you won't pick up anything. What we did in our club, we had a staff form, and it had personal information, because remember, this is for general risk, not necessarily child abuse. So some of the things are put on that form is, do they have a medical condition that may come up during activities? You could have an epileptic counselor and you don't know. So when you approach risk, you need to balance that. You also looking after the staff in the club and the children. You're basically looking at club wellness. So on the form, I had that about their own health, and if they're on any chronic meds or whatever. And also, obviously, what skills, what things they want to do, what honors they want to teach. And then there was also if there's anything that would impede them from working with children if the church were away. So they needed to declare. That was the thing. So they were committing to follow the principles of looking after kids and also the church beliefs. Of course, they're baptized if they're going to teach children, but you're just reinforcing that as a club, this is what we stand for, and we just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. Is that practical for you guys?
Is this taught to every master guide, or this
Risk management,
risk
yes.
management to every master guide? So, how come some of these things have never been implemented? Like,
Sometimes we feel like what he said, like there's things that have always been done a certain way, and how do you, as one individual, 2 or 8, decide to tell people that actually this must change? So it could be that. It could be that people don't make it practical. They focus on, because remember your MasterCard curriculum is so many things. So somebody, risk might not stand out for them. For someone else, it could be the creative workshops, and they become a brilliant teacher. So it could be some of that. Then, point D, there's a 6-month policy. Require a waiting period of 6 months for newly baptized or transferring members who have indicated a willingness to work with children. Get to know your new members. I used to say, if there's no one to teach the class and the parents are not willing, we don't have the class. We just don't have the class, because who's going to teach the kids? Now we must get strangers to teach the kids, and the risk is high. And like it, don't like it, just don't have the classes. What are the parents doing? So if a club has a deficit of teachers, that they just can't find teachers, and all the parents are doing that, are teaching, then you just don't have that class. And when you say that, sometimes the parents be like, okay, I'm coming, because the kids like the club. Yeah. Sometimes you will have people transferring by profession of faith, and they're very good with the kids. It's a policy, guys, so it's not like you're being unfriendly to people. You just pointed to a policy. You cannot do it yet. Let's just stick to the policy. But 6 months flies. We will, everybody who is Adventist, especially if it's professional faith, they should already know how the church works in terms of nominations and so on. I can't get here today and want to be a teacher. Okay, and then obviously train the teachers, volunteers, and so on in understanding child protection and all those things. There's one thing I haven't mentioned, which is the Form 52, is it? The police form that you must complete if you are aware of abuse. You must do that, because you're not a detective. So it's not up to you to decide, is this true, is this not? You pass it on to the relevant. Churches get into a lot of trouble by trying to do what the police should be doing. And then later it's uncovered that actually this was a criminal case and not something for a counselor to handle. So inquire within your church, or what is the process, and then you can compare it to the church manual and the Child Protection Act, because the church works within the Republic of South Africa, which has its laws. So you might want to check for yourself what is the church process and so on. Yes.
This one is probably more relevant for the next section, but I think this is the opportune time to say it. You'd rather err on the side, or take the side of the victim at all costs. The perpetrator has their own responsibility to prove themselves innocent. And when we're dealing with children, they are vulnerable already. You know, it's children, it's the people living with disability, it's the senior citizens. They can't protect themselves. So as a church, as a leader, protect the victim until proven otherwise. They won't lose their dignity if they can prove themselves. So what you need to do, you report it. You don't wait for the elder, the pastor. You saw something, or the child told you something in an activity that you were a counselor or a leader in. You go with the child, you go report to the police station, and you leave the matter to take its course. You call the elder, you call your youth leader or Pathfinder director or adventurer director. This is what happened after the effect. What we do is that we try, and we must call the Pathfinder director, we must call the elder, we must call the pastor, and meanwhile the victim is already lost. And why I'm saying it's more relevant in the next section, this is where we lose our children. Most of the children we will lose not because they don't love Christ, but because as a church we fail to protect them. And when you lose a child, you've lost their family, you've lost the clan, and you've actually lost the entire neighborhood. And we've got things and issues happening in courts where we are involved as a church. And unfortunately, as a church, I must say, we've actually tried to protect ourselves. We protect the image of the church, which we understand why, but then we've lost a whole community. And in the context of evangelism, we failed. So this is an area that is quite critical. And I think these policies are there for a reason. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I just want to correct. It's Form 22. I will leave it with your pastor just for you guys to peruse. It is an anonymous form, and it's reporting it to Department of Social Development, which is the social workers. They don't immediately go and arrest. They do a thorough investigation. So I was involved in a similar thing, but at my child's previous school, where there was a boy that was pretty much neglected. So what they did is they just got all the input from whoever, and they still went to do home visits. They still went to, so it's not that a person will get arrested just on your word. The form says source of report, so it will either say is it the victim or a relative or a caregiver, and then it specifies do not identify the person reporting. So there's no name, and then it says date and so on, neighborhood, friend or whatever, but it's just they put it in a big file with all the reports they get from everybody, and then they make a decision. Sometimes they don't even call you to tell you what has happened, because when it involves children, it's confidential. So they say do it. It doesn't mean that they could just check on the child and the parents could just get a caution, and sometimes it sorts things out, especially with child neglect, that they get told that actually the law takes this seriously, and then they don't do it anymore. But then at least it's off the church's hands, if the church was aware of that. On my last slide is the useful links, which is in the church policy and stance on that, and the insurance. So in Cape Town, there was no club that was allowed to participate in fairs and all those things if they don't have the church insurance. So when you sign up, you had to show the proof of insurance that your club is covered. Then you can participate. So that's some of the ways in which they mitigated risk on children.
Thank you very much. I just want to add a few comments that will help us as we navigate this thing that may come as a shock for some people. Sexual grooming is a process through which an adult befriends this child, gains their trust, and isolates the child and then sexualizes the relationship. It's a process the adult consciously drives. You see an uncle that's friendly to your child, that's giving sweets, as she was saying, an uncle that is, or even an aunt. Let me be mindful of that because they also do it. So they become friendly to your child in a very special way, and this child gets attached. And oftentimes, what the person does, they identify a need. They see you have neglected your child, and they become the parent, or they become the support to this child. And all seems innocent until after years, or even months, or even weeks, the child has gained confidence in the person, and they melt down, and the relationship is sexualized. So it's a real thing. What I do not want to say this too much, but the Seventh-day Adventist Church currently is in court because of this thing. The Seventh-day Adventist Church is in the media because of this thing. Do not trust, please note the people I'm going to mention. Do not trust a person because of the position, not even a pastor, not even an elder, not even a Pathfinder director, not even an adventurer director. Not everyone is a suspect in this matter. So you've got to be vigilant. You watch carefully the relationships that develop. This is what makes it sad. And I want to say it especially to our church as they are watching online all over, that parents are not interested in children's ministries. They are making their children vulnerable. If you're not interested, all you are interested in is coming into church and just, sitting here and gaining spiritual knowledge and all of that, and you dump your children in the children's church until they go home or until evening, you do not know what risk and exposure you are giving to children. This is across the board. It has nothing to do with any particular person. It is across the board. We've got to be vigilant. Not only is it sexual abuse that we must be vigilant against, sometimes even, some of you were engaging me last time we had a class, verbal and physical abuse. The law is serious. You must report it. You are held responsible for not reporting it. This whole thing of saying, let's pray about it, the state will not want to listen to any prayer. They will take you on very seriously. So I thought I would add these comments that she was making just to emphasize some of the things that we are dealing with. Some of our elders are held, and some of our pastors are held caught up in this thing. You wanted to say something. I wanted to give you a break, but let's allow you to. I was just wrapping up your presentation. Sorry that you make.
With our elders.
Yes.
I don't know whether it's in place, or would it be a suggestion that our elders, all of them, be master guides? Because all this training, it's very relevant to protecting our children. If they're going to put measures in place, like what we were saying, I wasn't screened. We haven't done that before. But
Because we are lax on it.
yeah, but if the elder in charge makes sure that all these things are ticked off on his checklist, then we are sure our children are protected. And also, if we can give all the parents of the kids that we are having a parents training before we start dealing with their children, so that they are responsible, they don't just leave their kids to come there. If they are aware of all these risks, of these guys who are giving Swiss to their children, they will not just let the child go unattended. So I'm just...
You are raising practical way forward issues that we need to attend to. You are saying, one, we need to, maybe they can do it as an assignment. You are right.
Yeah, elders must be master guides.
No, the assignment to take this forward and conscientize the church on these things. Parents, what's that one?
A training for parents before
Training
we
for
engage with the
parents.
children. Yeah.
Training for leaders, church leaders, and so on. So those are very good ways we could look at it to do this. So you have the steps, you have the guidelines that we can share with them, so that they do it as an assignment for next week. You see, they are owing me an assignment already. The more they postpone it, the more they owe.
Okay. I would prefer to leave the assignment as an initiative from them. They need to brainstorm as a group.
Yeah.
A contextual initiative that will work for this church.
Okay.
But still make sure that there is a risk awareness driven by this
master guide group.
Yes.
Thank you.
Because
the class rep will receive that. Will drive that, sorry.
Yes.
The class rep will drive. Yeah. All right.
You say the master guide manual says I need to do this in order to get invested.
Yeah. Then he will do it.
This is Kelvin, Baba.
All right. Thank you very much. What we will do now, we'll have a break. After the break for 5 minutes, we'll come back and we do the last one for the day. All right? Thank you very much. Enjoy your break. Mfundisi, we can go offline for a while now while we munch our lunch that the master guides have prepared. Thank you very much. Are we offline now?